Welcome to a special broadcast on Wisconsin's food manufacturing and processing industry. We have 4 industry leaders, and I'm going to ask each of them to identify themselves. Mark, would you go first, please?
My name is Mark Arthwaite. I'm the Executive Director for the Wisconsin Brewers Guild.
I'm Nick George, President of the Midwest Food Products Association.
My name is John Holyfield. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for the Wisconsin Dairy Business Association.
I'm John Umhafer. I'm Executive Director of the Wisconsin Cheesemakers Association.
We're also joined by 2 leaders of Competitive Wisconsin, a group with a vision of how sectors of Wisconsin's economy can grow and prosper. Please.
Hi, I'm Jim Wood. I am Chairman of Wood Communications Group, and I serve as Strategic Counsel to Competitive Wisconsin and to the BeBold Council.
And I am Mark O'Connell, Executive Director of the Wisconsin Counties Association, and also Vice President of Competitive Wisconsin.
Jim, before we get into some of these specifics, can you give us an overview of how important food processing and manufacturing is to Wisconsin's economy?
Food manufacturing is a critical and essential component of the Wisconsin economy. The cluster employs more than 64,000 people in Wisconsin and generates more than $8 billion for the state's gross domestic product, ranking it 10th in the nation. The cluster has demonstrated strong employment growth over the past decade, and comparative employment numbers suggest that the cluster is sustainable because it holds significant prominence in the nation's food production capacity. Wisconsin, for example, is the top dairy products employer in the nation, employing even more people than California, New York, and Ohio. It ranks 4th in the nation in employing people in the fruit and vegetable preserving specialty foods category, behind only California, Washington, and Oregon. It ranks 12th in animal slaughtering and processing and 8th in other food manufacturing. Equally important, Wisconsin's food manufacturers are major consumers of Wisconsin's agricultural produce and as such play a critical role in supporting and complementing rural economies across the state. So that's the numbers and the pictures and the charts of what the industry looks like here in the state of Wisconsin. But I think it would make some sense if you guys wouldn't mind, just take a couple of minutes and talk about who your members are and where they're located around the state, and give us some kind of a human feel. You're dealing with these people all the time. John?
So I represent the Dairy Business Association. We have several hundred farmer members. They're spread throughout the state pretty evenly, with probably the highest concentrations in south central, southwest, and in northeastern Wisconsin. We also have a membership for corporate sponsors, these are folks who support our farmers, and those again spread all throughout the state, including even our biggest cities. So really dairy touches almost every area of the state.
And our association has been around since 1905. We started out as the Wisconsin Canners Association. Now our membership is broader than just vegetable processors, but we are dominated by them. And like all processors, they go where the raw product is. So my membership is predominantly central Wisconsin, southern Wisconsin, and over on the western side of the state also.
The association's been around for 125 years this year. Our members are multi-generation families. They are cooperatives. There are some corporate members, and there's about 125 places in Wisconsin where we make cheese. In addition, there is yogurt makers, there's ice cream makers, and what's often not known is that there are as many, about 200 places in Wisconsin where we make cheese vats, we make dairy ingredients. So all told, there's about 500 members in our association who are making dairy products for people in the United States and around the world.
So Wisconsin Brewers Guild was founded in 1997. It's the 4th longest tenured craft brewers trade association in the United States. It would be surprising to a lot of people if they heard that about 35, 40 years ago there were only 7 producing breweries in the state of Wisconsin. We now have approximately 165 and probably another 15 that are coming online within the next year. So we've seen quite a resurgence in brewing activity in the state of Wisconsin. We're a membership of around 100 breweries and an additional 35 to 40 allied trade organizations as well.
Jim, could you give us a little background on what we're about to see and why we have all these experts around the table, please?
You bet, Steve. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Appreciate your being here today. Appreciate everybody's being here today. When the Deloitte came and did the first sounding board issue with representatives from the food manufacturing sector in Wisconsin, The group identified three major issues. They identified regulatory issues, they identified workforce issues, and they identified infrastructure and public awareness issues. This segment of the broadcast and program is going to focus on the workforce issues. And again, Steve, I know that you and Mark had a chance to talk to some of these industry leaders. So let me let you take the lead.
Well, I actually found this fascinating, Mark. I know you did too. When CEO of Breakbush talks about their inability to hire here, and just drove back yesterday from up north, and there's a sign outside the Breakbush plant on the I-39 now hiring. What were some of your impressions of the workforce issues that we heard?
Steve, the help wanted sign outside of Breakbush, you can't go 10 feet in this state without seeing a help wanted sign. It's not just in the food creation industry, it's everywhere. While all of us around this table, we are likely to work forever, there's a whole bunch of us in the baby boomer arena that are going to be retiring. Of course, not us, but others. And that poses a significant problem. Not only do we not have the human talent necessary in just pure numbers, we need a certain skill set. We need a certain conveyance of knowledge from those who have to those who need, so that they become the next generation of wealth makers, hopefully in the food creation industry. That's what we need. And we heard this time and time again. Let's take a look at the video and see what we heard from our colleagues in the industry. Say, the food products industry is so critically important to Wisconsin's economy. But we are facing a challenge in this industry. We're either on the eve or at daybreak of one of the biggest challenges I think our industry has ever faced, and that is workforce. Are you seeing that as a challenge? And if you are, what is that challenge you're seeing?
I think we are seeing it. The biggest thing is just the skill level and skill sets that people are coming in with. You know, I think most of us can find people, but can we find the right people?
That's interesting, Tom, because I see help wanted signs everywhere.
Sure.
But we're getting people applying for jobs. They just don't have the right skill set?
They don't have the right skill set, or they can't last because they may not have the right total skill set, the soft skills that we require, that most companies require. You know, and by soft skills, you know, you're talking about the ability to be coached, the ability to show up for work every day and understand why it's important. Maybe time management is another one, that just being able to look at things and say, yeah, I need to do this before I do that, and have, you know, that thought process. We used to take that for granted. Today it's not there with everyone.
Tom, in the dairy industry, we see it a little differently. We see it difficult at every level of entry, from that entry-level job to the mid-level, on-farm, herd type manager, all the way through to the industry support type jobs, whether it be in the agronomist, the sales, or the support division from companies. We see a shortage of jobs just in all those entry points in the marketplace.
So Cody, you're seeing not enough people even applying.
Yeah, we're seeing not enough people applying in every facet of the dairy industry, right from the entry-level employee on a dairy farm all the way up through those in the corporate hierarchy.
Would you say there's a career path within the dairy industry? You know, that people can start at a lower level and progress?
Yeah, and that's actually some of the challenge that we have. On a dairy farm, people view a dairy farm as a closed-off level. You can start an entry level and there's only so far to go. That isn't necessarily true in today's evolving dairy farm. You know, the dairy farm nowadays has a vertical integrated structure where the dairy farms are doing so many more things themselves. There's a lot of room for growth in that dairy farm, and the same thing goes on in the industry support networks on the product side. There's entry-level positions, whether it be in sales or marketing or social media, those new type of jobs too that are very keen on millennials. There's a huge path to move up the successive totem pole in those companies. We just don't look at it that way, and we haven't looked at it that way.
Okay.
You know, Mark, my people tell me all the time that people don't realize the variety of jobs in the food industry. And, you know, people think of assembly lines. Well, it's a lot more than that. I mean, when you go from getting the raw product and you're getting it into the plant and then running the equipment and packaging and the social media side, the technology side, and then getting it into the transportation and out to the market. There's a lot of stuff going on there.
So this is not our father's food product industry anymore.
It's
This
changing.
is high tech. This is complicated manufacturing. This is complicated assembling. This is marketing. It's social media, technology. that sounds to me like some high-level skills.
Can be, but every day I hear that it sure would be nice to find somebody who knew how to use a wrench and a screwdriver and just had some basic common sense and can maintain equipment. That's a big piece right there.
So these soft skills, getting to work on time, being able to put in a full day, are these, I guess, traits of our young people? Are they, are we not training them properly in our education system? Is it a parenting issue? I mean, what do we have here?
Probably all of the above. I mean, it may be a little of each. I think what we see, you've got some people that were underemployed for a number of years or unemployed, and they're coming back into the workforce. You also have some coming right out of high school that don't have those same skill sets that we took for granted 10, 15 years ago. People would come to work and they understood automatically that, yeah, it's a necessity to be there every day, not just 3 days out of 5. So that's something that you can coach towards, but how successful are you? And that's where I kind of look at it, that we need to be thinking of that in our 6th through 12 grades. Be bringing that about in our high schools to talk about what it is to go to work. Is it it's partially showing up every day, it's doing the complete job, things like that I think some of our people are missing as they're coming out of high school.
So Tom, that doesn't sound like it's necessarily food products industry skills. That sounds like it's something we need in the K-12 system about just basic skills to enter the workforce.
Across the board, I would agree. I think every one of us around this table would have some of those same issues with people that come to work in our industries or our areas. So,
Tom, we're in a labor force now, that the millennial labor force that's multiple generations removed from the farm or family farm in Wisconsin. Even when I was growing up, you look at kids in school and they had grandpas and grandmas and aunts and uncles that were still on farms and family farms, which created a different type of labor and a different type of individual that we have now. The state as a whole has moved away from that. So your kids in school now are most generally multiple generations removed from the dairy farm, or any farm for that matter. So they're not going to school for those ag-related fields because they no longer have grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncle, that have done those things. And that's the progression we're working into. Whereas that new generation now has this technology in their hands. So it changes the way their brains operate. Their brains are looking for technology jobs. They think they need to be involved and use technology. We talk about the wrench, operating a wrench. They don't know how to operate a wrench. They know how to operate an iPhone or a computer or a laptop or a tablet. That's the generation that's in there now, and that's the challenge at hand. And you can't necessarily change that generation and teach them how to use a wrench. We have to work towards finding individuals that can do those things, but how to maximize the comparative advantage for those that have those skill sets to use that technology in all of our industries.
Paul, you gonna make a comment?
Yeah, at the university I teach in the undergraduate program in ag business, and we see the same exact trends you guys are seeing, where we're in ag business and you think, okay, I teach a class called farm management, and you'd think that'd be full of farm kids. It's 2/3 of the class are from non-farm backgrounds, and it's a part of the ag business curriculum. And you see exactly the same thing. We have to recruit students in ag business who think it's all about farming. And it's like, no, ag business is much broader, and you still struggle with the skill set, but then it's a recruitment issue. The millennials are very interested in food. I think we can find a way to, I don't know what the word use. Food has kind of become sexy in the broad sense socially. Trendy is probably a better term. Yes, but people are interested in it, and so I think if we can find a way to motivate these people, we could bring another generation in. It's all about connecting with this generation who are different than we are.
Would you say it's more of a marketing challenge than Paul?
I guess if you mean marketing is recruiting people to come into the business and to work in that field, because I mean, I'm amazed at how many students who grow up in Wisconsin who don't realize how important food manufacturing is in terms of the size of the industry in our state. I work in vegetables. We're the 2nd largest vegetable processing state in the country. People don't know that. We have a big meat packing industry, and they think Packers. Well, there's a reason they're called the Green Bay Packers. That's a part of our tradition. But they so often don't realize how important those industries are economically in the state and the jobs those industries provide.
So, go ahead, Mark.
Well, I was just saying, we really need to rebuild the culture. Our employees 10, 15 years ago came in and they were involved. They're somewhat removed from that, as you pointed out, but we need to build a culture that you're part of a great group and something greater than just showing up for work every day. And that's our jobs as employers. We really need to strive and find solutions to that.
I think it's also not just a function of our ability to produce in terms of the numbers, but it's also, I think, an issue of the number of people we have in the state to work in these industries as well. I mean, our prime working age population is not projected to grow very much at all over the next 30 years. We need more folks to come to this state to be part of this industry, and to be honest, other industries as well. And typically we do not do a very good job of attracting people from other states. We are a very low in-migration state. So in order to really sell ourselves to other places, I think we have to think about some of our strong industry characteristics that we can use to attract those folks, but also what we can offer in terms of our state's quality of life, in terms of our schools, our housing, our good communities, and so on and so forth. In the short term, you know, to be honest, the industry employs about 64,000 people in the state of Wisconsin, and over a quarter of them are age 55 or older. So a lot of those folks, whether they like it or not, are probably approaching retirement age. So the question is, how do we get that next pipeline into the system, which is a lot of what we've been talking about here. But also it's just a simple series of numbers that we have to think about as well. If we look at our state's population, it's simply not an urban-rural issue as well. If you look at the share of individuals age 65 and older by county basis, at the 2010 census, we had 2 counties with a quarter of our population age 65 or older. By the year 2040, we're projected to have 45 of our 72 counties age 65 or older with a quarter of our population in those areas. So it's simply a numbers issue.
At the university, I see the students, we get the best and the brightest in the state, and yet we get so many of them that think they got to go to Chicago, they got to go to Minneapolis, they got to go to Denver. And we need to find a way to let them know that we have companies here in this state that operate internationally, and you can have you have a good quality of life, have the same business experience, and live in Wisconsin, where if you want to. I mean, I think we can do a better job, and I think that I put that more on the companies to
and these
sell
industries
that.
have high-paying jobs.
Yes.
Right. That's the memo to get across too. Even on the dairy farm level, you know, dairy farms in Wisconsin pay more than the median average, the median income average, for entry-level employees. There's high-paying jobs in Wisconsin. That's the message we need to continue to get out at every point.
And it's all the wage that you can earn is important to the new workers we're recruiting, but they need a full package, and we need to convey that.
Correct.
The perception is the jobs are dirty, the hours are long, the work is hard. That's not the case anymore. Again, we're so far removed from the farm, the factories that process the goods from the farm. We really need to strengthen that and have a clear message to the young people today that these are great jobs that pay well.
Right, and you're doing something good for the world. I think a lot of students now, I've noticed, they really want to know that they don't want just a job. They want a job that is contributing.
Impacts.
Yeah, exactly. You need to kind of, as a company, as an organization, to have a clear, why are we doing this? Why are we making cheese? Why are we making frozen vegetables? You know, what is the purpose of this beyond just it sells?
And we've missed that part of our story. Our products leave Wisconsin, they leave the United States. You can find our cheese and dairy products and vegetables everywhere.
Tom, you got a comment?
Well, I was going to say, I think it's, Cody touched on a little bit ago when he said, you know, getting in front of people early on. And I think it is, what I've seen is that, you know, as schools have cut budgets, things like this, we used to have every year 2-3 schools would be calling to say, can we come and tour your plant? And we would always accept that, have them come on in. The last few years, you haven't seen that much. And it's because, and a couple of them actually asked, could you foot the bill for the bus? And we did. Right. You know, so that's something I think it's incumbent on us as business to take that on too, that if we want to have that touch point, we may have to pay for it to get it, but it's very important at the high school level to bring students through and show them what the farm has, what the factories have, you know, so that they see the technology and you enable that feeling of belonging to something at that point.
The Competitive Wisconsin Report talks about the need to appeal to millennials and young workers. So I've just got this question for each of you four. What's your elevator message to millennials and young workers? If you had a minute in an elevator, why should they work for one of your members? Nick?
I would start out by saying there are opportunities galore in an industry that is stable. Even when times are tough, everybody needs to eat, so there's always jobs out there. And it's a diverse industry. You can work with the raw product, you can work with the machines and the people that make the product. You can work in the food safety side and the quality side to ensure that they're getting, good stuff. You can work in the transportation side. It's just a myriad of jobs out there available, and there, oftentimes the training takes place right there on the job. You don't need necessarily a 4-year degree or even a 2-year degree. So there's opportunity there for everybody. Good sustainable jobs in a good industry.
Mark?
Local is very important to millennials and young workers, so we epitomize local. We are a collection of small, independent, local breweries. So that, I think, would have to appeal to young people who want to know where their food is made, where it comes from. There are a lot of creative opportunities too for at least in the brewing industry. If you take a look at some of the labels and packaging that are on the shelves now, there's a wonderful array of creative ideas that we just see just in packaging. Brewing itself is a marriage of art and science. You have creative freedom, but it also is heavily dependent on knowing the science of making the product. So I think it's a fascinating industry for someone who really wants to explore creative opportunities.
John?
Sort of echoing some of what Nick said, that there are a lot of different opportunities. It doesn't just look like one position. There are a variety of positions. They can change over time. So it's a dynamic industry where you can be involved in what suits your interest already, but still play a role in what dairy does in Wisconsin. And I think there's also desire on the part of young people to be involved in something larger than themselves. This is a very fundamental industry. Mm-hmm. In fact, it doesn't get any more fundamental than what we're trying to do here, which is produce food. So that being the case, if you want to be part of something that matters, something that's important, this is the industry for you.
John?
Right, we've had speakers come into our industry, some young people, to tell us what the millennials are thinking, and it does dovetail to that last point. They want to care about their work. They want to care about what they're doing, and that really matches the pride that we see in our cheesemakers and the multi-generational families. Being a cheesemaker to our members is their life. It's their career. It's not a job. They talk about it all the time. You can't get them to talk about anything else. Making the best cheese in the world is a personal goal for them, not just something they do from 9 to 5. And I think the millennials can match and latch on to that feeling that this will be a career. It'll be something they'll do. They'll make great local food and feed the world.
Well, a quick follow-up question. If I'm a millennial and you've got me interested now, do I have to work 24/7? Some of those millennials, you've seen the studies, they want to log on and log off. I mean, is it going to be pretty time intensive? A lot of overtime, or?
There can be, especially if you're in a seasonal industry like the vegetable industry, perhaps. Your summers are pretty well consumed, but you're working in rural communities, you're working in the outdoors, you're handling fresh product. There are rewards to that, but oftentimes it's a regular schedule.
But I think you said those are family supporting jobs?
Oh yes, definitely family supporting jobs.
Right. Anybody else on that?
Yeah, the problem with an elevator speech is you need somebody in the elevator to listen to it. And what we discover as we listen to the folks out around the state, not just here in Wisconsin, but other places, is that the K-12 folks aren't aware of the fact that there is a food creation industry or a food manufacturing industry. So there's nobody in the elevator ready to listen to the speech. And so there's a set of issues that we need to deal with there. And again, not just restricted to food manufacturing. We think that there is a need to energize the relationship between the K-12 system and the economics that drive their communities and the employment opportunities that exist in those communities, so that the students and their families can make more informed decisions about what their opportunities are in the communities in which they're growing up, so that the educators themselves, the teachers, can get their arms around what they should know about local employers, et cetera, to be a source of support and education for their students. And so maybe we could get some people in that elevator who would be interested in listening to the sales pitch here. You know, there's a group called the Gold Collar folks, who are the manufacturers, who actually go out into high schools and make presentations and talk about the good jobs that exist in the area. And their track record's pretty good, where they can get an ongoing relationship with a particular high school. They get pretty good returns. They get internship programs going, et cetera. We need to get a lot more of that kind of stuff going on. And the other thing, you know, and this is my personal bias, I guess, it is, over the years we did work for Kraft and a number of other major food manufacturers. And I forget who said it, but there is a level of enthusiasm in those companies. I mean, there is a culture in which, when you're working with people who are doing the same thing and you learn more about the importance of public health and safety and packaging and distribution and where the food is going and how that helps, et cetera, and then watch how these companies interact with the community, so that I know a number of your members are heavily invested in the communities, as are others. And so there really is, it's like there's a world out there that this next generation has not seen yet. And when they're out there trying to figure out, how do I work for some place where I get to care about the community, where I get to engage, where I get to build a family, we're not on the radar, but lots of others aren't on the radar either. And so core to this discussion is the question of, how do we begin to build a better relationship between the private sector and the educational infrastructure in the state?
You know, Steve, I travel all over this state a lot. And I talk to young people groups from time to time. What I hear frequently from the young people is, I want to move X, Twin City, Chicago, Madison area, Fox Valley perhaps, Chippewa Valley. And why is that? Opportunity. What we do in our state, we're requiring our young people to consume financial literacy as knowledge. But perhaps we ought to be looking at consuming local economy awareness as knowledge. The food creation business is in every corner of this state. Yet, I think a lot of our young people don't even know it. We're in their backyard. We're down the street. There are opportunities in this industry, but we're not connected. Our K-12 system and our food creation industry are not connected. And that's one of the recommendations that came about in the BeBold study. We need to create more of a connection.
Whose job is it to send that message of how they're real jobs in growing industries? Is it the job of your private businesses? Is it the job of K-12? Is it the job of the tech schools? And then my related question is, there's a recommendation for a certification, but let's deal with my first question first. Whose job is it? And how well are your members communicating? Or is it a problem in K-12 that they're not sending the message, these are real jobs in a growing industry, you can live and be successful and raise a family here?
It's on us to talk to the educators and to the students out there, but to be honest, we could use a hand in our position. It's not our primary role. They're making cheese, they're distributing it, they're marketing it. If we could get a hand from government in making a program that does talk to the industry or talk to the students about industry, we would take that helping hand, because it's not our primary function. We can tell the story, but we're not necessarily educators.
Should that occur in K-12?
I think so, especially on the high end, but yes, absolutely.
It is our job to reach out there and get to know your teachers in your community and your schools, and let them know you're there and let them know what's available. But it's got to go both ways. It has to go both ways.
Part of the problem here is that in our K-12 system, we are trying to stuff 14 hours worth of work into a 10-hour day for our teachers, and there are so many requirements for what they have to do. There are a lot of teachers out there that would love to have the food creation industry come into the classroom and say, explain to me what it is you do. Talk about the opportunities you might have for my upperclassmen in high school that might go on to a 2-year college degree or tech college degree, or even 4-year university degree. Show me the opportunities. Yet, where do you fit that in when they've already got 14 hours worth we're trying to stuff into a 10-hour day?
You let some of the previous 10 hours go is the answer, I think. That's my personal opinion about it. But let me go back to Steve's question. Whose job is it? I think it's everybody's job, okay? The reality is that the numbers say if we don't fix the job question in this state in terms of numbers of workers and keeping workers here and getting them into good jobs, the tax base continues to erode. If the tax base erodes, the school system's in trouble, the tech college system's in trouble, the UW system is in trouble. So the question is, how do you put those pieces together? The state of Wisconsin now has an academic career plan requirement that says starting in 6th grade, I think it is, every student has to begin to develop an academic career plan. Part of that exercise is they go online, use a piece of software, and talk about their preferences and their interests. And out of that comes a collective body of information for every school in the school district, not by name, but a collective body of information. So for the first time in history, the private sector could look at that collective data and either see their workforce in there or see what's missing from what they need in terms of the workforce to inform those presentations when they go into the schools. The second thing they can see is whether or not the teaching force that they have in that school is aligned with the interests of the students, okay? And so now you have, for the first time, an opportunity to say, well, I don't see my field in there. And again, it's not just food manufacturing, it's all the employers in an area. And or I see, well, there's a shortage here, they might need this in terms of technology or science training or whatever it may be. That produces an access where the private sector and the public sector could talk to each other about how we help, okay? So that rather than sitting on the outside and waiting for them, the schools to tell us what they're doing, or vice versa, we could say, well, how would we deal with this? We talked when we were talking about the regulatory stuff, about the need to be problem solvers, to come together to fix things, to use our strengths and your strengths appropriately to figure out new ways of going forward. That's what Wisconsin needs to do. Other places, again, we're not living in a vacuum here. So around the country, you will find other places, and there are places in Wisconsin that are leading the way in terms of how you do some of these sorts of things. So again, I think that this whole question of what do we need to do to energize the pipeline is a critical piece. And what the folks came up with in the strategic planning process and the Deloitte stuff is we have to engage more directly, okay? And that engagement involves understanding that right now teachers are not incentivized and school districts are not incentivized to talk to their students and their constituents about the local economy. They get paid and rewarded based upon how they're teaching reading, how they're teaching math, how they're teaching science, and some other bits and pieces, all of which is critical. Nobody's saying leave that. But there is this vacuum in which they're not understanding the nature of the economy.
And one of the recommendations is, which I found fascinating, is for a certification in food processing and manufacturing. So flesh that out for me. Who would certify? Would it be a tech college? Would it be the UW system? You know how they're competitive, in case anybody didn't know that. But so the idea of certification, is this offered in Colorado, Texas, and New York?
The certification, and again, I'm going to let the folks here talk about what's going on in their industry. I'll give you a quick summary of what we heard in the strategic planning process and from the Deloitte stuff. The concept of hiring by degree is weakening, okay? It's not precise enough, and most major employers would prefer to do the final finishing, if you will. And so they are looking for people who can demonstrate specific skill sets related to different kinds of job levels. Some are entry-level jobs, some are other kinds of things. And so the concept is that, once again, it's everybody's job. That this will not work unless the private sector works together with every level of the educational infrastructure. So you would have, a lot of our high schools now are what are called blended high schools. So you got kids in a K-12 system or at 9 through 12. Some are taking advanced placement courses for college. Some are taking technical college placement, advanced placement courses. And you take a look at that and you say, this is what I need and this is what the certification looks like. And the advantage of that is you ramp up the student's interest because he can see a finite goal, he can see a finite training program, and in most cases, the employers in the community will say, if you've got that, I got a job for you, okay? And so let me stop there and let you guys kind of fill in.
Certification program for food processing and manufacturing, what skills would your businesses look for in that? If you were asked, help us devise a certification program for this industry, what skills? Mark?
There are some certification programs already for brewery employees. We actually would generally acquire new workers who have already been through some kind of either technical college or college training. Given the nature of the products that we make, we don't make hires directly out of high school. So, so most of the skill sets actually from brewery employees are developed in hospitality industry, and sometimes we poach from the cheesemakers as well. But understanding the concepts of sterility and sanitation, things like that, are of the highest priority.
Nick?
I think that's the key. To understand the importance of food safety would be a key part of that. Understanding that there are certain standards that need to be met, and how food should be handled and treated. That would be a key part of it. And as Mark said, there are already a number of certification programs out there, depending on the industry you're in, and the profession of that industry. But definitely food safety.
Again, yes, we do have certification on food safety. We have certification to operate in the laboratories that test the dairy products. We have certification to make the cheese. We're a rather regulated industry, but what we found is we're adding a lot of training for that frontline worker, that first step in the door. We're training those folks better on what they're coming into, what their expectations are when they come in the door. We've done a good job up the ladder, but we need more training for the entry level. And I think that's a role that could come out of this study, is maybe a new certification just in dairy processing, kind of this is a football sort of level of certification.
And John?
And we probably have skills that are requirements for skills that are slightly different than a lot of the other folks here at this table. So some might have to deal with animal welfare or animal care. We might have other people who would be interested and they could take some sort of certification in agronomy or soil science. Again, less than the university degree that we currently offer that at UW-Madison, but something more than nothing to give them a leg up, an introduction to what we're about if they're going to be on the cropping side of things.
So Jim, what I hear you saying is go back to the academic career plan. If certification, in food manufacturing or processing was offered, one more possibility, it would raise the profile of a critical vital industry in the state, right? Yes, am I kind of get it right? Yep. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think most students, believe it or not, are not looking forward to spending the rest of their lives in their parents' basements. And so despite what you hear about them, they're saying, what am I going to do with myself at some point in time? And they come in, particularly in Wisconsin, where while we have an out-migration problem, lots of people stay in Wisconsin, okay? Particularly in rural counties, et cetera. And so they're aware of their community heritage. Grandpa worked at the plant, or Susie worked at the whatever it may be. And so they know that, and there's a piece about that. What they don't have is a knowledge about what that means for them, okay? They don't have a clear pathway that they can see. There's nothing they can test. They don't know how to do it because all of those systems have gone by the wayside as a result of the Great Recession, as a result of a variety of other kinds of things. And so there's this opportunity and this need to build an environment in which they can tell us what they're looking for. We can say, have we got that? And if we do, figure out how to let them know that we do. And then to deal with the question of, okay, so now we have a potential audience. Get the damn elevator up here so I can give my speech, and let's see if we can get them in here and turn them into productive employees. And from their vantage point, create an environment where they can start to earn a living and build a family and all the rest of it. So I think that relationship with the educational infrastructure is a major piece. And as we've said on the regulatory front, as the industry continues to change, we also need a relationship with the infrastructure that enables us to educate and train our teachers more broadly in these kinds of issues so they're on top of that stuff. I do want to just, because I know that we do not have 4 hours of your time, I do want to mention this, that in addition to the need for better trained, better educated, or more aware students, however you want to describe that, that we also have a shortage of workers in the state of Wisconsin. We have an aging population, but for the last 40 years, we've had a declining birth rate in the state of Wisconsin. And so the number of workers available to folks is also being adversely impacted. So one of the recommendations that came up, and one of the things people talked about, was the need to recruit people. It's not just a matter of educating them and keeping them here. It is a matter of saying we actually need to start recruiting people here. And I think, I forget who, but somebody was talking about the fact that, oh, I know, I think again it was Breakbush, that they put a larger investment into Texas than they did into Westfield. A large chunk of which was they weren't sure they could get the workers that they needed, numerically get the workers that they needed in the Westfield area or in Wisconsin. So I think let's spend just a minute on that if we can. I mean, when in our program on regulation, 3 of the 4 of you said regulation is the #1 issue to deal with. John, you said it's right up there with workforce. So let me ask you to kind of start off with this. How big is the shortage issue here?
It's enormous for our manufacturers. The anecdotes I hear is where you might get 40 people 20 years ago showing up for a job notice in the newspaper, and now you get 1 or 2. And the one you hire may walk away after 2 days. So it's acute. We have an acute workforce problem. We can't change the numbers, we can't change the birth rate in this state, but we can try to become premier employers. We have to stand out, and it is part of the education system to do that, to teach them that we're here, to let the teachers know we're here. But also it's on us to provide great jobs, to provide great salaries, to build ladders of opportunity up through the ranks of the company and show them what the top might look like. So it takes all of the above, but the problem is acute.
Our members have, in the vegetable industry at least, and in the meat industry, we've brought in immigrants for years, so they're very familiar with the whole immigration issue. And they've been doing it for years. It's definitely a way to help fill the gap. But it's an acute problem, and immigration plays into this.
Well, which is a follow-up question, Nick, for all of you. How important is a resolution of the nation's immigration problem, which Congress in Washington has been unable to resolve? How critical is the immigration picture to meeting some of your workforce needs?
Well, I think it's important. There's no doubt about it, because nobody wants to. First of all, it's the number of workers, but then it's the legality of workers, and it's the trouble people can get in, and it's just a lot of paperwork. So I think the resolution is a big deal, getting the problem solved, answered.
John had mentioned earlier, I mean, we don't have enough smart young talent. We don't have enough young talent. We don't have enough smart young talent. So we didn't get into this problem in 1, 2, 4, 10 years, and it's going to be difficult to get out of it in that amount of time. And it's not just this industry. It's unfair, I think, to ask one industry, how are you going to address getting more young, smart talent to be your next generation of wealth makers to be employed in your corporation? I think we got to get into the psyche of humans. I mean, take us, for example, baby boomers. We actually believed you could buy happiness. You give us enough money, we'll go anywhere. And we work and we get up every morning and we live so we can work. That's why we exist. But the millennials are different. We got to get into their head. They wake up every morning and they go to work because they have something better to do later called living. They're looking for quality of life. They want lots of different activities. They want outdoor recreation. They want diversity. They want nightlife. They want continuing education, not even for a degree. They want a lot of quality of life type items. If we want to get and attract more smart young talent, we gotta go beyond our usual mindset. And unfortunately, our generation, most of us, the baby boomers, we're making all the rules. Instead, we've got to get into the head of those young people and say, let's create the attractive communities that you want to be in. And then, hand in hand with that, in the food creation industry, we say, not only do we have a great community, not only do we have great recreation opportunities, not only do we have continuing education for you, we've got a tremendous opportunity in this food industry to be part of something really big, important, quality of life, producing something that gives life to other people. We have that. But it goes hand in hand. And I don't think in terms of our public policies, we're actually getting to that point. We focus on little micro issues as opposed to the real challenge, which is a macro one.
Sounds like that's telling the story of your successful members, and that there's jobs there, there's going to be more jobs there, and that they're jobs that they can raise their family with and enjoy being productive members of their community. So it's telling a story, isn't it, Mark?
Mm-hmm. It is.
It is, and at the risk of driving us forward here, so we've talked about in the group, in the strategic planning exercise and the research identified really three workforce issues. One is a shortage of workers, and we got to deal with that through recruitment and retention, okay? And I think we've touched on one of that. The second issue we talked about is the need to improve the capacity of the industry, whether it's our industry or some other industry, and the educational infrastructure to serve their clientele, and for us to be able to make more available information about what options people might have if they want to stay in Wisconsin. And I would underscore Mark's point. You know, if we're going to do recruitment and retention, quality of life becomes a whole lot more important. One of the things that we did in BeBoldIII, we didn't do just the conventional sort of comparison, economic development comparison, which is what you do is you look at the cost of doing business, okay? That's taxes, regulations, et cetera. But we said because of the age we live in, we also need to take a look at the cost of living and the quality of life if we're going to be doing recruitment. And that's the cost of housing, that's the cost of, it's what kind of stuff is available. And one of the problems we've got is if our tax base is eroding, it's hard to build the kind of communities you want. And so there really are some challenges, and the clock is ticking on us here as we move forward. On the retention idea and what is now being referred to as the grow your own strategy, which is one of the first things you do when you're shortage of workers, you say, is there a population that somehow we are not taking advantage of? And what we know is that there are in excess of 100,000 jobs posted, open in the state of Wisconsin, that are sitting there. And we know that we still have an unemployment level, and that unemployment level does not include people who have stopped looking for jobs. And so there are people out there, and the question is, what do you do about that? So the third issue that came up in the research and in our discussions was this whole question of the impact of public benefits on hiring, okay? And I guess I'd ask as we move through the program here, if you guys could just comment on that a little bit in terms of how pervasive it is, how much of a problem your folks think it is, and where you see it all referenced.
I think his question is, are our system of current public benefits a disincentive to solving some of your workforce issues? Fair?
That's fair.
I've heard from some of my human resource people that that's true. Somebody might be on some government health program, whatever it may be, and it's a better program than what the members can offer for health care. So it's like, why would that person jeopardize what they have for something not quite as good? And it's definitely an issue. So I think what we've talked about with BeBold is to sort of ease that transition from whatever public benefit program you're on to the private sector. Make it easier.
We just have to solve the healthcare issue in the United States. It's a simple task, but it's one that's affecting our industry as well as others. If there's a better deal for them through the public sector, they're going to take it. So we've got to solve this national problem of healthcare.
Yeah, it's the most of the breweries that are members of our organization are very small, and for them to be able to provide benefits is very desirable, but it's also very difficult. And in fact, a lot of times, the brewery owner, their spouse, is the one that's carrying the health benefits from another job. So this is John's exactly right. The overall solution to health insurance for workers would be a big part of the puzzle.
From a national standpoint.
Absolutely, not just in the food production business, certainly just in general. I think that's something we have to confront.
So are we talking here about a transition period where one of your companies hires someone who's now receiving unemployment benefits, and she or he is weaned off of that, I can't solve the healthcare problem.
Right.
But so there's some transition period, and after that transition period of months or whatever, that worker would then go off public benefits and receive wages and other benefits from some of your members? Is that a better system?
If a transition is needed to get where we need to be on national health care, that may be the case simply because it's going to take time to make a solution. But frankly, if we could get there today, if we could get healthcare costs down for the businessman, then we could be competitive with what's offered in the public sector.
As somebody said, this is more complicated than people think, and so
I've heard that.
the
Said in the White House.
Yeah, the programming produces what's called cost shifting, okay? And so as certain kinds of costs go up in the public sector or payments come down in the public sector, some of that cost gets shifted to the private sector, which drives your costs up. Also, by the way, we're short nurses and we're short doctors, and the only way you're going to get that dealt with is to compete, which is what we're doing at the moment. And that in turn drives up costs or negatively affects quality of care. And so all of those are issues, which we'll talk about when I come back in here with the healthcare people, are on the table as you try to do this. But the essence of this approach, it seems to me, is to say that while one can understand an individual who makes the decision that says, in the interest of my family or my own life, I'm better off on this program than I am if I went and took a job and was on that program, that decision affects other people. It affects taxpayers, it affects demand, where the system grows or doesn't grow, et cetera. So the premise here is that the society, the economy, the local economy, is better served if those folks have gainful employment in the private sector. And so the premise is not that the transition would produce a competitive posture for them, but that it would say, this is what's available in the private sector. And the public sector premise was never supposed to be a lifelong phenomenon. It was supposed to address short-term needs and issues. Okay? Now maybe it's time to rethink all of that and people can have at it, but that's where we find ourselves at the moment. And so it may be that a transition will not be sufficient. That people say, no, I still don't want it. But what I know right now is we're being told that a transition would be a best practice run at it.
Labor is in great demand. So when an employer might be looking at a potential human resource, and you finally get down to the conversation of compensation, immediately after compensation are the benefits, right? So, and major among that is healthcare. When we're paying roughly, give or take, let's say as an employer, $1,500, $2,000 a month per employee for healthcare, it becomes very, very difficult to get an employee from somewhere else, out of state, wherever they might be, to come to Wisconsin, given what we have to offer in terms of compensation package, while they're giving up, let's say, $24,000 a year in health insurance benefit. Very, very difficult. So I guess as Mark and John pointed out, healthcare is a major stumbling block. If we were to magically remove healthcare from the equation, we would have much greater mobility of young talent all over this country. And with what we have to offer in this state, with the food creation industry opportunities, we could draw young people in. So, I mean, I guess it's a long way to say our national healthcare problem is hurting us in this state.
That would go a long way toward enhancing the quality of life issues if that's off your plate and having to really just only focus your energies as a young worker on quality of life, doing a job that you really enjoy, and not being forced into what, for us would be, it's hard to watch somebody have to make a choice that they wouldn't take a job because strictly because the benefits in their current situation outweigh their desire to find employment that would really make them happy and give them quality of life.
But again, I think the premise here is not that we are talking about transitions for people who are gainfully employed in the private sector someplace else. Right. We're talking about public benefits here. And so, again, we'll see where this goes.
All right, so if I can summarize, what every person watching this show today should do is right after they get done watching Wisconsin-I, go make some more smart young people. That's what we really need. We need more population in this state, that it gets more education, where we can take these young people and marry them with the opportunities that we have in the food creation industry, where we have an education community, K-12, two-year college, tech college, and four-year university, fully aware of what we have to offer in the food creation industry, and conveying that opportunity knowledge to our smart young talent of the future. We need that. If we're going to be successful, not only do we need to address regulatory issues, we need to address this workforce issue. We've got so much to offer in this state. We've got great quality of life, although it could be a lot better, and we're working on it. We need to draw that smart young talent from everywhere, from within our state and from outside, so that we can populate with the talent we need to continue to be #1 in the world in food creation.
Well, I'd like to end this segment the way I ended the last segment, and that is ask each of you, we're talking here about workforce issues, the one change that you'd like to see made that would help your members with their workforce issues. John.
A fundamental change in how we approach immigration policy, whether that's some sort of global approach or if it's a specific targeted approach for food processing and agriculture.
Thank you. John.
I think for our side, it would be to get the word out about our industry, whether that's happening through schools, through government, or through ourselves. I think we've been the wallpaper too long, the wallpaper that's supported this state. We need to step out into the front and say, we are the premier industry in this state, come work for us.
Thank you. Nick?
I kind of like that one. It's the same thing. We're a quiet industry. We need to find a way to get the word out that we're there and jobs are available.
And Mark?
I'd say the health insurance issue is a big one for small employers. Need to be able to provide for their employees, and they really need help providing health insurance.
This has been fascinating. I'm struck by how workforce issues are major factors for your members. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.